Avraham, takes his son Isaac, Yitzchak, on the most important father-son journey in history in this week's Torah portion. It's a sad journey because Avraham believes that at the end of the trip, he's going to have to sacrifice his son per the command of God. I went on a father-son trip of my own last weekend because I was invited to speak in La Jolla, California for Shabbos. I took along one of my sons to turn it into a father-son trip, and we had a fantastic time together. But during the trip, I was thinking about and trying unsuccessfully to wrap my mind around what must have been going through Avraham's head during his father-son trip on the way to kill his son. He was probably reminiscing about all of the wonderful, touching, tender, beautiful, poignant moments that he had shared with his son, beginning with his youth all the way through adulthood. And realize, Avraham wasn't some lunatic brandishing a butcher's knife at his son's throat due to some psychosis or misuse of recreational drugs.
Hey, Dad.
What do you want?
I wanted to trade my fruit roll-up for a strawberry one.
Sorry, son, of course you can't.
No, Avraham was rational. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was following God's command. Now, on my trip, I was able to be in constant contact with my wife, texting her or calling her or emailing pictures to her of my son and I kayaking or sightseeing or making new friends or playing ball together. Avraham would not have had that luxury because smartphones were not invented thousands of years ago. So I wondered, before he left on his journey, did Avraham tell his beloved wife Sarah, the nature of the journey, where they were going and why, in order to give her an opportunity to say goodbye to her only son? I had always thought that the answer to that question was no, because at the beginning of next week's Torah portion, Rashi, the greatest of the commentators, explains that Sarah died immediately after the binding of Yitzchak. Why? Because Satan, the Satan, rushed back to her to tell her that her husband had bound her son as a sacrifice and had killed him. And from the shock of hearing that news, she died. But a rabbi with whom I'm very close pointed out to me that his father showed him once that if you look carefully at the text in that Rashi, you'll see that that's not what Rashi says. He says that the Satan ran back and told Sarah that her son was bound as a sacrifice by Avraham and that he wasn't killed. But if that's the case, why would she have gone into shock and died? And so this rabbi's father explains. To a woman like Sarah, who had dedicated her life and her marriage and the upbringing of her son to one thing and one thing only, serving God, her greatest fear for her son would not have been physical danger or even him dying. Her greatest fear would have been that he'd face a supreme spiritual test and fail. And so because the son didn't share with her the crucial detail that the reason the sacrifice didn't go through was due to the fact that God had halted it at the last moment, she would have thought, knowing perhaps full well what that journey was all about, because maybe Avraham did tell her beforehand so that she could say goodbye. She would have thought that Yitzchak had failed the test. She would have known that there was no way Avraham could have overpowered his 37-year-old adult son to tie him up and bind him for the sacrifice. And so if at the last moment it didn't go through, she would have figured that it would have been because Yitzchak had balked and changed his mind. And she would have realized the enormity of the opportunity cost. She would have known that had it been successful, had Avraham sacrificed Yitzchak, it would have created enormous merit for eternity, as it ended up doing. To this day, when the Jews stray, God's merciful towards us because he remembers the merit that we have through the willingness that Avraham and Yitzchak demonstrated to sacrifice everything for God. And she would have realized that going through with the sacrifice would have given all of Abraham's descendants, as it did, the ability to sacrifice everything for our Creator. And it makes sense if you think about it. Because throughout the millennia of our exile, so many times in so many areas, our bitterest enemies have had control over our bodies. They've tortured us. They've enslaved us. They've killed us. But they've never had control over our minds, over our spirituality, over our faith. And that's what has sustained us throughout all those years.